Move. Now, that seat belongs to me." The words sliced through the quiet hum of the first-class cabin like a blade. Mrs. Patricia Langley stood in the aisle, designer luggage in one perfectly manicured hand, her other hand pointing directly at a 10-year-old girl sitting alone in seat 2A. The child didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply looked up from her sketchbook with calm, dark eyes and said quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is my seat." Patricia's face twisted. "Don't you dare speak back to me. Do you even know where you are?" What happened next on that flight from New York to Los Angeles would be seen by millions of people around the world, and nobody, not a single soul on that plane, saw it coming. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel, drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from, and let's see just how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The gate at John F. Kennedy International Airport was already humming with the particular kind of nervous energy that only long flights seem to produce. Families adjusted carry-ons. Business travelers tapped furiously at laptops balanced on their knees. And the overhead announcements blended into a constant stream of background noise that everyone had long since stopped processing. Gate 14B was assigned to Continental Airways Flight 882, nonstop service to Los Angeles International. Lily Harper sat in one of the hard plastic seats near the window, her legs not quite reaching the floor. She was 10 years old, small for her age, with her dark, natural hair pulled back neatly and a faded green backpack tucked between her feet. In her lap sat a worn sketchbook, and her pencil moved across the page in steady, confident strokes. She was drawing a bird in flight. She'd been drawing birds ever since her mother passed. She didn't look up when the gate agent made the first boarding announcement. She didn't look up when the line for Zone 1 began forming. She only looked up when the woman next to her, a tired-looking grandmother traveling with a cane, asked her gently if she was flying alone. "Yes, ma'am," Lily said. "My grandfather is meeting me in Los Angeles." The woman smiled warmly. "That's a long flight for a little one." Lily smiled back. "I've done it before." She had, in fact, done it twice before. Her grandfather, Mr. William Harper, was not the kind of man who allowed distance to interrupt family. And Lily, despite everything she had lost in her young life, was not the kind of child who allowed distance to make her small. When the Zone 1 boarding call came, Lily stood, tucked her sketchbook into the front pocket of her backpack, and walked calmly toward the gate agent. The woman behind the desk scanned her boarding pass, glanced up briefly at the child standing before her, and then looked back at the screen. A small pause, then a second glance. Lily's boarding pass read Seat 2A, First Class. The agent smiled, the kind of smile adults give children when they're unsure what else to do, and handed the pass back. "Enjoy your flight, sweetheart," Lily said, "Thank you," and walked down the jet bridge. She found her seat easily, window seat, left side of the aircraft, first row of the first-class cabin. The seat was wide and cream-colored, and when Lily sat down in it, she looked even smaller than she already was. But she settled in without hesitation, pulled her sketchbook back out, and got to work on the bird's wings. A flight attendant named Rachel, young, red-haired, with a warm smile that reached her eyes, came by within moments. "Can I get you something to drink before we push back?" Rachel asked. "Apple juice, please," Lily said. "No ice." "You got it." Rachel hesitated just a moment, the way people always did when they noticed a child traveling alone in first class. But Lily had learned to wait out that hesitation without making anyone feel embarrassed about it. She just kept her eyes on the sketchbook until Rachel walked away. The cabin filled slowly. Business people in tailored suits. An older couple who looked like they had been flying first class since before Lily was born. A man in his 50s with a silver watch and a phone that never stopped buzzing. Lily cataloged them quietly without staring, the way her grandfather had taught her. You learn more from watching people than from talking to them, he had told her once. But you learn the most important things from listening. She was listening when the trouble started. She heard the voice before she saw the person. It was the kind of voice that was designed to carry, not because it was loud exactly, but because it was absolutely certain of its own importance. Sharp consonants, a slight drawl, the practiced cadence of a woman who had spent decades making sure people understood she was not to be kept waiting. I specifically requested the window seat in the first row. I have been a long-time platinum member with this airline, and I'm told my seat assignment has been changed. Do you understand what platinum status means? Lily looked up. Mrs. Patricia Langley was somewhere in her late 50s, with blonde hair that had been dyed so many times it had taken on a faintly metallic quality, and she wore a pale beige coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She had the posture of someone who had been told her whole life that how you carry yourself is everything. She was talking to a young gate agent who had followed her onto the plane, his tablet in hand, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Langley, I do understand, and I sincerely apologize for the confusion. However, the seat assignment on your boarding pass is 2C. I don't care what it says on the boarding pass. I called ahead. I spoke with someone named Daniel. He confirmed 2A. She said the seat number like it was a throne. The window, 2A. The gate agent glanced down the aisle. His eyes found Lily sitting quietly in 2A, pencil in hand, sketchbook open. He looked back at Patricia. Ma'am, the passenger assigned to 2A is already seated. Then have her moved. Patricia said it the way people say, take out the trash. Simply without drama, as if the idea that anyone might object hadn't occurred to her. Lily set down her pencil. She had heard that tone before, not often, but enough to know exactly what it meant and exactly where it came from. It wasn't anger, really. Anger, at least, acknowledged the other person. This was something colder. This was the assumption of invisibility, the absolute bone-deep certainty that the child in seat 2A didn't count. Patricia walked down the aisle without waiting for the gate agent's response. She stopped at row 2, looked down at Lily, and the expression on her face was the kind you might wear when you find something unexpected and unwelcome in a place where it doesn't belong. You're in my seat, Patricia said. Lily looked up at her calmly. I'm in seat 2A. That's what my boarding pass says. I don't need you to read your boarding pass to me. Patricia's voice dropped into something quieter, which somehow made it worse. I'm telling you, this is my seat. So, why don't you take your things and find where you're actually supposed to be sitting? I'm supposed to be sitting here, Lily said. Her voice was steady, not defiant, not trembling, simply steady. Patricia blinked. Whatever reaction she had been expecting, tears probably, or embarrassed scrambling, this was not it. A 10-year-old girl looking directly at her and speaking in a calm, clear voice was apparently not something she had prepared for. Excuse me? Patricia said. I said I'm supposed to be sitting here. My boarding pass says seat 2A. This is seat 2A. Lily reached into her backpack and held out the boarding pass with 2 hands, the way her mother had taught her to offer things to adults, politely, clearly. Patricia didn't take it. She looked at it the way you look at something that is technically correct, but offends you anyway. Where are your parents? She said. My mother passed away, Lily said. My grandfather is meeting me in Los Angeles. There was a half second, just half a second, where something shifted in Patricia's face. Something that might, in someone else, have been the beginning of compassion, but it passed. "Well," Patricia said, pulling herself back up to full height, "I'm sure your grandfather would want you in a seat that is actually assigned to you. So, let's get a flight attendant." She turned and raised her hand as if she were hailing a cab. Rachel, the red-haired flight attendant, was already moving toward them. She had been watching from the galley, and her expression was carefully professional as she came up the aisle. "Is there a problem?" Rachel asked. "Yes," Patricia said. "There is absolutely a problem. This child is sitting in my seat, and I need her moved. I have been a long-time Platinum member, and I specifically requested this window seat. I want it resolved now before we push back." Rachel looked at Lily. "Can I see your boarding pass, honey?" Lily handed it over without a word. Rachel looked at it, her brow furrowed slightly. She looked up at the seat marker on the overhead bin. She looked back at the boarding pass. "Ma'am," Rachel said, turning carefully to Patricia, "this boarding pass is for seat 2A. Patricia stared at her. "I'm sorry. The child's boarding pass is assigned to seat 2A. Your boarding pass." Rachel glanced at the document Patricia was now thrusting toward her. "Is for 2C, the aisle seat." The silence that followed was the particular kind that happens when someone very powerful suddenly realizes the ground beneath them is not as solid as they believed. It lasted a moment. Then Patricia said, "That is a mistake." "I understand. That is a mistake made by someone in your reservations department. I spoke with a man named Daniel. He confirmed the window seat for me. I have been flying this airline since before this child was born, and I am not going to sit in an aisle seat because some computer made an error." Rachel drew a slow, careful breath. "Mrs. Langley, I do hear you, and I'm so sorry for the confusion. But at this time, the seat assignments as printed on your boarding documents are what we're working with, and 2A is assigned to this passenger." "Then reassign it," Patricia said flatly. "Move her to economy. I don't care where she sits as long as it isn't here." Lily said nothing. She was looking out the window now, watching the baggage carts move across the tarmac. But her hand resting on the armrest had tightened slightly. Just slightly. Rachel glanced at Lily, and something passed across the flight attendant's face. Something that was equal parts professional conflict and genuine discomfort. Because Patricia Langley was, in point of fact, a longtime Platinum member, and Platinum members at Continental Airways received a level of service that the staff handbook described using the word prioritized. The pressure was real. The dynamic was real. "Let me speak with my lead," Rachel said. "Just one moment." She walked back toward the galley. Lily could hear the low murmur of voices, but couldn't make out the words. Patricia stood in the aisle, one hand resting on the headrest of seat 2B, radiating impatience like heat from a stove. The older woman across the aisle, the silver-haired one who had been watching all of this from her seat with the quiet attention of someone who had lived long enough to recognize exactly what was happening, leaned slightly toward Lily. "Don't you move an inch," she said, low and firm. Lily turned to look at her. The woman held her gaze steadily. Her eyes were very blue and very clear. "Not 1 inch." Lily gave the smallest possible nod. Rachel returned from the galley with her lead flight attendant, a tall man named Michael, whose name tag also identified him as senior cabin crew. Michael had the posture of someone who had handled hundreds of difficult passengers and had long since learned to keep his face completely unreadable. "Mrs. Langley," Michael said, "I understand there's been a concern about your seat assignment. I'd be happy to help resolve this." "Good," Patricia said. "Then move the child." Michael looked at Lily's boarding pass, which Rachel handed to him. He looked at it for a longer moment than Rachel had. Then he looked at his own tablet, scrolled briefly, and looked again. "Mrs. Langley," he said, "the seat assignment for 2A is confirmed for this passenger. I don't care what it says on a screen. I called ahead." "I understand that, ma'am, and I will absolutely follow up on that call on your behalf. But at this moment, the confirmed assignment—" "Are you seriously telling me," Patricia said, her voice dropping to something controlled and dangerous, "that you are choosing a child who clearly doesn't belong in first class over a long-time platinum member? Is that what you're telling me?" The words hung in the air. "Clearly does not belong." The silver-haired woman across the aisle made a short, sharp sound. The businessman in 3A looked up from his phone. Lily kept her eyes on the sketchbook in her lap. She had picked up her pencil again, but she wasn't drawing. She was simply holding it. Michael said carefully, "Mrs. Langley, every passenger on this aircraft has a right to their confirmed seat assignment regardless of—" "Regardless of what?" Patricia cut him off. "Regardless of their status? Regardless of how much money they spend on this airline every year? You are making a serious mistake, and I promise you the people who make decisions about your career are going to hear about this conversation." Michael held his position. "Ma'am, I'd ask you to please take your seat." "My seat is the window seat, 2A. Patricia turned from Michael as if he had stopped existing and looked directly at Lily. "I don't know who bought you this ticket or why, but I am going to find out, and when I do, you are going to be moved. Do you understand me?" Lily looked up from her sketchbook. She looked directly at Patricia Langley. In a quiet, even voice, she said, "I understand that you are very upset, ma'am, but I am not going to move." The cabin had gone completely still. Even the background noise, the soft mechanical sounds of a plane preparing for departure, the distant radio chatter seemed to fade. Every person within earshot was now paying full and undivided attention to row 2 of the first-class cabin. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "What did you just say to me?" "I said I understand that you're upset," Lily repeated, "and I'm sorry you're having a hard time, but my ticket is for this seat and I am not going to move." The older woman across the aisle let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, quickly converted into a cough. Michael stepped forward with slightly more urgency. "Mrs. Langley, I'm going to need to ask you to take your assigned seat at this time so that we can prepare for departure." "This is not over," Patricia said. She pointed at Lily. Actually pointed, her finger aimed like something she intended to fire. "This is not over." She moved to 2C and sat down with the particular fury of a person who has lost a battle they were certain they would win. She pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly, her jaw set, her movements tight and controlled. Rachel appeared at Lily's side. She crouched down slightly to be at eye level with the girl. Her voice was very quiet. "Are you okay?" Lily looked at her. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry about that." "It's okay," Lily said. "She was going to do that no matter what." Rachel looked at her for a moment with an expression that moved through several things in quick succession before settling on something warm and a little sad. "Can I bring you anything? More juice?" "Yes, please, and—" Lily hesitated. "Do you have any of those little warm nuts? My grandfather says the warm nuts on this airline are the best he's had anywhere." Rachel smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that happens before you can stop it. "We absolutely do." She stood and walked back toward the galley. Lily looked down at her sketchbook. The bird she had been drawing before all of this started was still there, halfway finished. Its wings spread wide across the page. She picked up her pencil and began to work on the right wing, filling in the feathers one careful line at a time. Across the aisle, the silver-haired woman was watching her with something close to admiration. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "A hawk," Lily said. The woman nodded slowly. "Appropriate," she said. In seat 2C, Patricia Langley's fingers moved furiously across her phone screen. She was composing an email to the airline's executive customer service team, a team she had personally corresponded with on previous occasions, two of which had resulted in direct apologies from a vice president. She was writing the words "unacceptable treatment" and "years of loyalty" and "I expect an immediate response." She was building a case in the systematic, detail-oriented way she always built cases, and she was absolutely certain of the outcome. She did not know, in that moment, what was on the passport in Lily's green backpack. She did not know the name that was printed there, in the careful, official font of the United States government. She did not know that when the captain would walk into this cabin and look at that passport, his entire demeanor would change. The plane began to push back from the gate. The seatbelt sign came on with a soft chime. The cabin crew moved through their pre-departure routines with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this 1,000 times. The businessman in 3A finally put his phone away. The older couple near the back of first class adjusted their pillows. Rachel moved through the cabin with a quiet word for each passenger, her smile consistent and professional. And when it reached Lily, something warmer. Patricia did not acknowledge the seatbelt sign. She was still on her phone, and the particular angle of her body turned slightly away from Lily, chin elevated. Communicated as clearly as any words could that she considered this round to have been a technical loss on a procedural matter, not a real one. Real rounds were still coming. Lily finished the right wing of the hawk. She studied it for a moment, then added 3 precise lines to the tail feathers, adjusting the angle of the bird's descent. Her grandfather had a real hawk at his estate outside Los Angeles. His name was Arthur, and he had been with Mr. William Harper for years. Lily had been terrified of him the first time she visited. By the second visit, she had learned to hold her arm very still and let Arthur land on it. And she had felt something shift inside her. Standing there with the weight of a hawk on her arm and the wide green California countryside spreading out around her, her grandfather had stood beside her and said very quietly, "There, now you know." She had asked him what she knew. He had said that the things that seem the most frightening are usually the ones that are simply the most free. She had written it in the front of her sketchbook in small, careful letters, and she looked at it sometimes when things were hard. She was not looking at it now. She didn't need to. The plane reached the runway. The engines grew louder. Lily closed her sketchbook, tucked it away, and leaned back in the wide, cream-colored seat. Patricia in 2C was finally forced by the flight attendant to put her phone in airplane mode. She did it with the expression of someone surrendering a weapon under protest. The plane gathered speed. Lily looked out the window, her window, in her seat, as New York fell away below them. The city lights spread out like scattered stars, and the Hudson River caught the last of the evening sun and held it for a moment, silver and perfect, before they rose above the clouds and the world below disappeared entirely. Lily pressed one hand flat against the cool of the window glass. "Okay, Mom," she said, so quietly that no one heard it. "Here we go." And high above the country, the real trouble was just beginning to find its shape. Patricia Langley had not survived years of building herself into a woman of consequence by accepting defeat in a first-class cabin. She'd been quiet for the early part of the flight, not because she was calm, but because she was calculating. She had sent emails and left a voicemail before they reached cruising altitude. She had reviewed the airline's platinum member terms of service on her phone during the brief window before airplane mode was required. And she had found, or believed she had found, the precise language she needed. She had the name of the Vice President of Customer Relations in her contacts. She had used that contact before. She was a woman who knew how power worked. She had spent decades learning exactly which levers to pull and when to pull them. The seat beside her, 2A, with its insufferable small occupant and its insufferable view of the clouds, was a matter of principle now, not comfort, principle. When the seatbelt sign went off, Patricia pressed her call button. Rachel appeared within moments. "Yes, Mrs. Langley? I'd like to speak with the most senior crew member on this flight." Rachel's expression remained professional. "That would be Michael, our senior cabin crew. He spoke with you earlier. I'd like to speak with him again, please." A pause. "Of course. I'll let him know." Patricia folded her hands in her lap and waited. She was good at waiting when she was building towards something. Patience, deployed strategically, was one of her best tools. Michael appeared shortly. "Mrs. Langley, what can I help you with?" "I've been reviewing the Platinum Member Service Guarantee," Patricia said. Her voice was composed and almost friendly, which was, if you knew her, a more dangerous sign than the anger from earlier. Section 4 of the terms states that Platinum members with documented seat requests confirmed before travel are entitled to best effort accommodation of those requests, including reallocation of seats from lower-tier ticket classes. Michael looked at her steadily. "I'm familiar with the terms." "Then you know that I have a documented request," Patricia said, "made and confirmed by a representative." She held up her phone, which displayed a screenshot of an email from Continental Airways customer service with a reference number at the top. "I'd like you to look at this and tell me whether you intend to honor your own policy." Michael looked at the email. He looked at it for a long time. In seat 2A, Lily had her earbuds in, but she had not started her movie yet. She was watching Michael's face in her peripheral vision. She had not turned her head. Michael looked up from the phone. "Mrs. Langley, this confirmation is for a seat request, not a guaranteed assignment. The language in Section 4 specifies best effort accommodation, which means we accommodate where possible without displacing a confirmed passenger." "The child," Patricia said, and she managed to make those two words carry an enormous amount of freight, dismissal, and certainty, and a very particular kind of social arithmetic that made Lily's jaw tighten slightly. "Is traveling as an unaccompanied minor. Unaccompanied minors in the airline's own policy are typically accommodated in economy or business class, not in first-class seats on a transcontinental flight. Unaccompanied minor policy is a guideline for standard bookings," Michael said carefully. "It does not apply when a first-class ticket has been purchased by whom?" Patricia said. "Who purchased a first-class transcontinental ticket for a child traveling alone?" The question sat in the air. It was, objectively, not an unreasonable question. It was also, the way Patricia asked it, not really a question at all. It was a suggestion, a nudge toward an implication. A child this young, this alone, in a seat this expensive. The implication was that something was not right, that the paperwork, however it appeared, could not possibly be legitimate. And the thing was, the deeply uncomfortable thing, that Michael could not immediately answer it, because the booking information he had access to showed a standard first-class ticket, fully paid, under the name L. Harper. And beyond that, the system did not elaborate. He said carefully, "The ticket is legitimately purchased and confirmed." "By whom?" Patricia asked again. "I'm not in a position to share passenger booking information." "You don't know," Patricia said. "It wasn't a question. You don't know who bought the ticket, which means you don't know whether there's been some kind of error, some kind of mix-up." She paused. "I'm not trying to be unkind to the child. I'm asking you to do your job." The older woman across the aisle, the one with the very blue eyes and the clear gaze, had stopped pretending to read her book. Lily took out one earbud, just one. Michael drew himself up slightly. "Mrs. Langley, I understand your concerns. I will look into the booking details and get back to you. In the meantime, I need to ask that you allow our passengers to enjoy their flight without further disruption." "I'm not disrupting anyone," Patricia said pleasantly. "I'm having a conversation." Michael held her gaze for a moment longer than strictly necessary. "I'll be back with you shortly." He walked toward the galley. Lily watched him go. Then she looked, for the first time, directly at Patricia Langley. Patricia was already looking at her. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The woman built up by certainty. The girl of 10, built up by things Patricia Langley would never know about and could not have imagined. Lily put her earbud back in. She pressed play. On the screen in front of her, the opening credits of a nature documentary began to roll. It was about hawks. She almost smiled. In the galley, Michael was on the phone with the ground operations desk, quietly requesting a full review of the booking details for Seat 2A on Flight 882. The person on the other end of the line asked him to wait. He waited. He heard the sound of keys. Then he heard the person on the other end of the line go very quiet. "Michael," the voice said, "who's asking about this booking?" "A platinum passenger with a competing seat request." Another pause. Longer this time. "Michael." The voice was different now, more careful. "You need to let me connect you with the duty manager. Don't do anything with that seat. Don't move the passenger in 2A. I'm connecting you now." Michael stood in the galley with the phone in his hand, and a feeling he couldn't quite name settled over him. Not quite unease. Something more like the particular alertness you feel when the ground shifts slightly beneath your feet, and you realize the world is bigger and stranger than the piece of it you were standing on a moment ago. "Understood," he said. "Connecting now." And in Seat 2A, 10-year-old Lily Harper watched a hawk drop out of a clear sky toward the earth, wings folded, falling with perfect precision toward exactly where it intended to land. The sketchbook was still on the floor of the aisle. Nobody had picked it up. Not the flight attendants, not the passengers nearby, not Patricia Langley, who had thrown it there and was now sitting in 2C with her arms crossed and her chin elevated, the way a person sits when they have decided that what they just did was entirely justified. The pages had fanned open when it hit the floor, and the drawing of the hawk, the one Lily had been working on since the gate, was face up, visible to anyone who walked past. Lily looked at it for a few seconds. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt, stepped into the aisle, crouched down, and picked it up herself. She smoothed the bent pages carefully. She looked at the hawk drawing. One corner of the page had creased. She pressed it flat with her thumb, the way you'd try to undo something that couldn't quite be undone. And then she sat back down, placed the sketchbook on her tray table, and buckled herself back in. She did not say a word. That silence, that absolute, deliberate 10-year-old silence, did more damage to Patricia Langley than any argument could have. The older woman across the aisle, the one with the blue eyes who had told Lily not to move an inch, was watching all of this. Her name was Helen Brooks, and she had lived long enough to know that there are two kinds of dignity in this world: the kind you perform and the kind you simply have. She had just watched a child demonstrate the second kind so completely that Helen felt something tighten in her throat that she hadn't expected. She leaned forward. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Lily looked up. "Yes, ma'am, thank you." "What's his name?" Helen nodded toward the sketchbook. Lily blanked. "The hawk?" "Yes." "Arthur," Lily said. "He belongs to my grandfather." Helen smiled. Then he'll be glad to have you back. In the galley, Michael was still on the phone. The duty manager on the ground, a man named Ellis, who Michael had spoken to before in his years of flying this route during a medical emergency over the country, was talking in a voice that had taken on a very specific quality. The quality of a man choosing every word with exceptional care. Michael, I need you to confirm something for me. The passenger in 2A, what name is on the boarding pass? L. Harper, Michael said. First initial L, surname Harper. A pause. And you've seen the passport? Not yet. The passenger hasn't needed to produce it. Another pause, longer. Michael, I'm going to need you to ask the passenger in 2A for her travel documentation, passport specifically, and I need you to look at the full name. Michael lowered his voice. Ellis, what exactly is going on? Just look at the passport, Ellis said, and then call me back before you do anything else. Do not move that passenger. Do you understand me? Under no circumstances. Michael stood with the phone in his hand for a moment after Ellis ended the call. Rachel was watching him from across the galley with the alert stillness of someone who knows something is happening but doesn't yet know what. What was that about? She said quietly. I don't know yet, Michael said, but I need to speak to the passenger in 2A. He walked back into the cabin. Patricia saw him coming and straightened up immediately, her expression sharpening with anticipation. She'd been waiting for this. She had made her case. She had produced her documentation. She had been patient, strategically, and with great effort. Now Michael was walking back down the aisle with the look of a man who had gotten answers, and Patricia was already preparing her expression of gracious, magnanimous victory. Michael stopped at row 2. He did not look at Patricia. He crouched slightly to bring himself to Lily's eye level. The same thing Rachel had done earlier, that instinctive act of courtesy. And he said quietly, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I need to ask, do you have your passport with you? Lily reached into the front pocket of her green backpack without hesitation. She pulled out a dark blue United States passport, the kind with the eagle on the front, worn slightly at the corners from travel. She held it out with both hands. Of course, she said. Michael took it. He opened it to the photo page. He looked at it. And then something happened to Michael's face that he could not entirely prevent. Though he was a man who had spent years training himself to keep his face professionally neutral in every conceivable situation, his eyebrows moved just slightly, just for a fraction of a second, but in the absolute attentive silence of that first-class cabin. Several people saw it. Helen Brooks saw it. The businessman in 3A who had put his phone down for the first time since boarding saw it. Rachel, who had followed Michael at a discreet distance and was now standing at the entrance to the cabin, saw it. Patricia Langley saw it. Well, she said. Michael closed the passport. He held it for one more moment. Then he handed it back to Lily with both hands, a gesture that was small but not, somehow, insignificant. Thank you, he said to Lily. His voice had changed, not dramatically, but the shift was there. He stood up. He turned to face Patricia. Mrs. Langley, he said, I want to apologize for any inconvenience during this flight. Your concerns have been noted and will be addressed in full. However, I need to be absolutely clear with you. The passenger in seat 2A will not be moved, not under any circumstances. The seat is hers. Patricia stared at him. I showed you the confirmation email. I understand, and our customer service team will follow up with you about your seat preference documentation after we land. I'll make sure of it personally. That's not. Patricia stopped. There was something in Michael's tone, not aggressive, not apologetic, but final in a way she hadn't heard from him before, that made her pause. What was in that passport? I'm not in a position to share passenger information, Michael said. You looked at it and your whole face changed. Don't tell me there's nothing. Ma'am. Michael's voice was still calm, still professional. But there was something beneath it now that was the verbal equivalent of a door being firmly and politely closed. I'm going to ask you one more time to please enjoy your flight. He walked back toward the galley. Patricia turned to look at Lily. Lily was looking out the window. The country was far below them, invisible beneath a solid layer of cloud. This is absolutely not over. This is absolutely not over. Helen Brooks, across the aisle, set down her book, removed her reading glasses, and looked directly at Patricia Langley with the very specific expression of an elderly woman who is run entirely out of patience. Dear, Helen said, it rather looks like it is. The cabin was quiet for a moment. Then the businessman in 3A made a sound that was clearly a laugh converted at the last possible second into a cough. Someone near the back of first class shifted in their seat. The collective atmosphere of the cabin had changed in a way that was subtle but unmistakable. The way a room changes when the people in it have collectively decided without discussion which side they're on. Patricia felt it. She was not a stupid woman. She felt the shift the way you feel a temperature drop, not dramatically, but in the particular way that tells you the weather is changing and not in your favor. She turned back to face forward, her jaw set, and picked up her phone. In the galley, Michael was back on the phone with Ellis. I looked at the passport, Michael said. And? Ellis said. Lily Harper, Michael said. Date of birth consistent with a 10-year-old United States passport. Did you see the emergency contact page? Ellis asked. Michael hadn't. He said so. The contact listed, Ellis said slowly, is Mr. William Harper of Harper Global Holdings. Michael stood very still. Harper Global Holdings. He knew that name. Everyone in the aviation industry knew that name. Harper Global Holdings was a multinational conglomerate with interests in shipping, real estate, private equity, and, critically, unmistakably, in a way that made Michael's professional life suddenly feel very small and very fragile. Continental Airways. Mr. William Harper's investment group owned a controlling interest in the airline, had for years. Michael had attended a staff briefing about it. There had been a company newsletter. Ellis, Michael said, yes. Are you telling me that the child in 2A is Mr. William Harper's granddaughter? Ellis's pause was its own answer. The booking, Ellis said finally, was made through the Harper Holdings corporate account. We didn't flag it in the system because the account books under various names for security reasons. We only confirmed it when our senior reservations manager pulled the full file. Michael put one hand flat on the galley counter. Does the captain know? Not yet, Ellis said. That's going to be your call, Michael, but I'd make it fast. Michael ended the call. He turned to Rachel, who was looking at him with wide eyes. Go check on the passenger in 2A, he said. Make sure she has everything she needs. Everything. Whatever she asks for. Michael, I need to speak to Captain Reynolds. He walked toward the flight deck. Rachel stood alone in the galley for a moment. Then she smoothed her uniform jacket, composed her face into her best professional warmth, and walked back into the cabin. She stopped at row 2. Lily had both earbuds in now. On the small screen in front of her, the hawk from the documentary was landing on a falconer's glove in slow motion, its wings spreading wide at the last second to catch the air and slow itself perfectly. Rachel touched Lily's shoulder gently. Lily looked up. Can I get you anything? We have the dinner service starting soon, but I wanted to check on you personally. Lily removed one earbud. I'm okay, thank you. Are you sure? I want to make sure you're comfortable. Lily looked at her for a moment. There was something in Lily's gaze, thoughtful, older than 10, measuring, that made Rachel feel oddly like she was the one being taken care of. "The warm nuts were really good," Lily said. "Can I have more?" Rachel laughed, an actual, genuine laugh. "You absolutely can." She turned to head back to the galley and nearly walked directly into Patricia Langley, who had stood up from 2C and was now blocking the aisle with her arms crossed. "I'd like to know what's in that passport," Patricia said flatly. Rachel held her ground. "I'm sorry." Michael went to the galley and came back, and something had changed. "Now you're here treating this child like she's royalty. I want to know why." "Mrs. Langley, I treat all of our passengers." "Don't," Patricia cut her off. "Don't give me the company line. I've been on plenty of these flights, and I know what normal service looks like. And I know what someone covering something up looks like." "Who is she?" Rachel met her eyes. "She's a passenger on this flight, Mrs. Langley, just like you." "That," Patricia said, "is obviously not true." Rachel stepped to the side, creating space in the aisle. "I need to get back to the galley. Please let me know if you need anything." She walked away. Patricia stood in the aisle for a moment, alone, and the feeling that gathered in her chest was something she would have described, if she were being honest with herself, as fear. Not the clean, sharp fear of a specific threat, but the murky, formless fear of someone who senses that the ground beneath a long-held certainty has begun to soften. She sat back down. She looked at Lily. Lily was watching her Hawk documentary, one earbud in now, utterly composed, as if Patricia Langley was simply part of the ambient noise of the flight, as if she was the window seat, and Patricia was a slightly annoying cloud. Patricia hated it. She hated it with a precision and intensity that surprised even her. "You know," she said, her voice pitched low, aimed at Lily, "it doesn't matter who bought you that ticket. On this plane, in this world, what matters is who you are." Lily turned her head slowly. She looked at Patricia with those steady, dark eyes. "I agree with that," Lily said. Patricia blinked. She had expected either silence or protest, not agreement, not that particular quiet, certain kind of agreement that somehow managed to turn the sentence around and point it back. "Good," Patricia said, recovering quickly. "Then you understand that I am someone on this plane and in this world, and I deserve to be treated accordingly." Lily nodded slowly. "So does everyone," she said, and she turned back to her screen. Helen Brooks, who had heard all of this, picked her book back up and allowed herself a very small smile behind the pages. On the flight deck, Captain Reynolds was an experienced pilot, ex-Air Force, with years with Continental Airways, and the kind of man who had seen enough in his career to be genuinely unshockable. He had landed in zero-visibility fog. He had handled a medical emergency that resulted in an emergency diversion. He had, on separate occasions, managed bomb scares with a calmness that his crew had later described as almost supernatural. Michael's knock on the flight deck door did not alarm him. What Michael told him, however, made him set down his coffee cup. "Say that again," Reynolds said. Michael said it again. Reynolds was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The granddaughter." "Yes, sir." "Traveling alone?" "Unaccompanied minor headed to Los Angeles." "And the disturbance in the cabin?" "A platinum passenger. She's been demanding the seat since before departure. She threw the child's property in the aisle." Michael paused. "Threw it, sir." Reynolds turned in his seat to look at his first officer, a younger man who was managing his own expression with the careful effort of someone who very much wants to ask a question, but knows this is not the moment. Reynolds turned back. "I'm going out there," Reynolds said. Michael nodded once. "I thought you might." Reynolds stood, adjusted his uniform jacket, and picked up the passport that Michael had brought forward. He looked at the photo page, the small, serious face, dark eyes, hair pulled back neatly. In the photo, she was younger and she was not smiling, and she looked somehow, even in a passport photo, like someone who was paying attention to things other people weren't noticing. He closed the passport. He opened the flight deck door and walked into the cabin. The effect of a captain walking into the cabin is always noticeable. There is something about the uniform, the presence, the implication of authority that makes people sit up slightly, heads turned. The businessman in 3A looked up. Helen Brooks watched over the top of her glasses. Rachel and Michael both stood slightly straighter. Patricia Langley sat up very straight and began mentally composing what she was going to say. Captain Reynolds walked directly to row 2. He stood in the aisle and his gaze moved first to Lily, a brief, assessing look that was not unkind, and then to Patricia. "Good evening," he said. His voice carried that particular quality of someone who does not need to raise it to fill a room. "I understand there's been a disagreement about seating." Patricia launched in. "Captain, I'm glad you're here. I've been a long-time platinum member with this airline, and I specifically requested this window seat." "I've been briefed," Reynolds said, not unkindly, but with finality. Patricia stopped. "I've also," Reynolds said, "reviewed the seating documentation." He turned to Lily. "May I see your passport, please?" Lily reached into her backpack and produced it again with both hands. Reynolds took it. He opened it. He looked at the photo page. He looked at the name. He looked at the emergency contacts. He closed it. And then he did something that nobody in the first-class cabin of Flight 882 expected. He handed the passport back to Lily with both hands, and he said, clearly, audibly, in the way that meant he absolutely did not mind who else heard it, "Miss Harper, I want to personally welcome you aboard this flight and sincerely apologize for any discomfort you've experienced today. You have my word that the rest of this journey will be everything it should be." The name landed in the cabin the way a stone lands in still water. Harper. Not the name on her boarding pass, the everyday name she carried in ordinary life. Harper. The name on the passport. The real name. The name that in certain rooms, in certain boardrooms, and certainly in the senior offices of Continental Airways carried a weight that very few names could match. Patricia Langley heard it. Her face changed. It did not change all at once. It changed the way ice changes in spring. Not a single crack, but a slow, spreading fracture moving outward from a center point. The color shifted first, draining from her cheeks in a way that her carefully applied foundation could not quite conceal. Then her eyes, which had been sharp and certain all evening, went briefly unfocused, like a camera losing its subject. She looked at Lily. Lily was putting her passport back in her green backpack. "Harper," Patricia said. It came out barely above a whisper. Reynolds turned to face her. "Mrs. Langley," his voice was pleasant and absolute. "You will return to your assigned seat. You will remain there for the duration of the flight. If I hear that there has been any further disruption of any kind involving this passenger, I will have you met by airport authorities when we land at Los Angeles International. Is that clear?" Patricia opened her mouth. She closed it. She was not a foolish woman. She understood, in this moment, with a horrible and crystalline clarity, exactly what had happened, and exactly how badly she had miscalculated. Harper. William Harper. The man whose name was on the building that housed the airline's headquarters. The man whose investment group's annual report she had actually read when she was considering buying shares. The granddaughter. She had thrown the granddaughter's sketchbook on the floor of the airplane. She started. "Mrs. Langley," Reynolds said. She sat down. Captain Reynolds turned back to Lily one more time. Lily was looking up at him with those steady eyes. And there was something in them. Not triumph, not relief, not the vindicated satisfaction that any adult in her position would have been entirely entitled to feel, but simply patience. The patience of someone who had always known, quietly and without drama, how this was going to end. "Is there anything you need, Miss Harper?" Reynolds asked. Lily thought about it for a second. "Could someone pick up my pencil?" she said. It rolled under the seat when the sketchbook fell. Reynolds looked at Michael. Michael was already moving. He crouched in the aisle, reached under the seat, and retrieved a standard yellow pencil, slightly worn down from use. He stood up and handed it to Lily with a gravity that was, under any other circumstances, slightly absurd. A senior cabin crew member presenting a pencil to a child, as though it were something precious. And yet, somehow, in this particular moment, it was. Lily took it. She opened her sketchbook to the hawk drawing. She looked at the creased corner that Patricia's throw had made. She smoothed it again, one more time, and then she placed the pencil tip against the paper and added a single, careful line to the hawk's left wing. Reynolds walked back to the flight deck. The cabin settled, not into the silence that had existed before, which had been the silence of people trying to pretend they weren't listening. A different kind of silence, the kind that follows a storm when the air has cleared, and the world is rearranging itself around a new reality. Helen Brooks looked at Lily for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Your grandfather must be a remarkable man." Lily kept her pencil moving. "He says the same thing about my mother." Helen absorbed this. "She sounds like she was." "She was everything," Lily said simply. Across the aisle, 2 seats back, a young woman who had been silent the entire time and had been filming on her phone, with the careful, steady hands of someone who knew exactly what they were capturing, pressed stop. She looked at what she had. Captain Reynolds' entrance. The name. Patricia Langley's face draining of color like water leaving a glass. The pencil. Lily smoothing the page. She looked at it. Then she opened her data connection. They were still close enough to the coast to have signal, and she posted it. She did not know, pressing that button, that the video would have millions of views. She did not know that Patricia Langley's face, frozen in that moment of horrified comprehension, would become the image that defined an entire conversation about wealth and entitlement, and the particular blindness that comes from spending too long believing the world is simply an extension of your own importance. She put her phone away and looked at the back of Lily's head, small and neat above the wide cream seat. In 2C, Patricia Langley sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes fixed straight ahead. She was not typing. She was not calling anyone. She was not building a case. She was sitting with the specific stillness of a person who has just understood, completely and without any remaining ambiguity, that they have made a very serious mistake. She did not yet know about the phone. She would. Lily added the final feathers to the hawk's left wing. She studied the drawing. She turned it slightly, checking the angle of the wings against the angle of descent. Her grandfather had once told her that Arthur, when he dived, reached impressive speeds. She was trying to get that feeling into the drawing, the feeling of something moving so fast and so precisely that speed and intention had become the same thing. She thought she was getting close. The dinner service began. Rachel moved through the cabin with a warmth that was now entirely without the earlier uncertainty. She brought Lily her meal first, placed it with both hands, asked if there was anything else she could bring. Lily said, "Yes, please. She would love a glass of water and, if they had it, a small piece of the dark chocolate from the dessert tray. Rachel brought both, along with the entire dessert tray, and told Lily to take whatever she wanted. Lily took one piece of dark chocolate. "Give that half to the lady across the aisle," she said, nodding toward Helen Brooks. "She was kind to me." Rachel looked at the half piece of chocolate, then at Lily. Then she smiled the kind of smile that you can't entirely explain, and walked across the aisle. Helen Brooks received the chocolate with both eyebrows raised, looked over at Lily, and pressed one hand briefly to her heart. In 2C, Patricia Langley stared at her untouched dinner. Outside the windows, the country stretched in every direction, dark and enormous and indifferent. And the plane moved through the night at cruising speed, carrying all of them forward toward the moment when everything that had happened in the first-class cabin of Flight 882 would meet the world waiting on the other side. The chocolate was a small thing, but small things on a long flight over a dark country have a way of meaning everything. Helen Brooks held the half piece in her palm and looked at it the way people look at something that has unexpectedly moved them. Then she looked across the aisle at Lily, who had already turned back to her sketchbook, already adding another line to a wing. Already somewhere inside the quiet world she carried with her wherever she went. Helen put the chocolate in her mouth. She picked up her book. She did not read a single word of it for some time. The cabin had settled into the particular rhythm of a long flight. The soft sounds of cutlery, the low murmur of conversations, the muted blue glow of entertainment screens. The flight attendants moved with purpose and efficiency. The temperature had dropped slightly, the way it always does once a plane reaches cruising altitude, and the night outside the windows becomes permanent and total. Patricia Langley had not touched her dinner. She was looking at the tray in front of her, the way people look at things they are not actually seeing because they are too busy looking at something inside their own head. The meal, salmon with a light cream sauce and a side of roasted vegetables, had gone cold. The wine she had ordered, a white burgundy she had selected with the automatic confidence of someone who always orders the best without checking the price, sat untouched, its condensation ring spreading slowly on the tray table. Harper. She kept turning the name over in her mind, kept approaching it from different angles, the way you circle a problem looking for the angle where it seems smaller. But it didn't get smaller. It got larger every time she thought it. Mr. William Harper. She had met him once at a charity gala in Beverly Hills. He had been pointed out to her across the room by her husband, Robert, who had said very quietly, "That man owns more of this city than the city knows." She had looked across the room at an elderly man in a dark suit, slightly built, with white hair, and an expression of total tranquility. And she had thought that he looked like someone's grandfather. She had thought, unkindly and privately, that he didn't look like much. She thought about that now. She thought about it with the specific anguish of someone who has just discovered that a judgment they made in a moment of casual arrogance was in fact a preview of exactly this moment. She picked up her wine glass, set it back down without drinking. Across the aisle and one row back, the young woman with the phone. Her name was Natalie. She was a freelance journalist traveling to Los Angeles for an assignment that was now going to be significantly less important than what she had just filmed, was watching her screen with the focused attention of someone watching a number climb. She had posted things online before, articles, photographs, the occasional short video. Nothing had ever moved like this. Nothing had ever climbed like this. She could feel it, almost physically, the way a stone feels different in your hand when you realize it's actually a gem. She picked the phone back up. She looked at the back of Lily's seat, then at the side of Patricia's face, still and pale, and turned slightly away from the world. She opened a new document and began to type. Over the middle of the country now, deep into the dark, the coast of both ends of the journey equally distant, equally unreachable. This was the part of a coast-to-coast flight where you are more alone than almost anywhere else on Earth. Suspended, untethered, belonging to neither where you came from nor where you're going. Lily had finished the hawk. She looked at the drawing for a long time, the way she always did when something was complete. Her mother had taught her to do that, to stop when you were done and just look, without judging, without immediately wondering what to change. Let it be finished, her mother used to say. It earned that. Her mother's name had been Claire. She had died from an illness that had moved faster than the doctors had predicted, and faster than anyone had been prepared for. She had been the most extraordinary person who had ever lived in Lily's complete and unwavering assessment. Claire had not been born into money. She had met Mr. William Harper's son, Lily's father, Daniel, at a university in New York where they were both studying architecture. They had fallen in love with a completeness and certainty that had surprised both of them. Mr. William had not initially been certain about the match. He was a man who had spent his life building walls around things he valued, and his son was one of those things, and he was cautious. But then he had met Claire, and something in his carefully maintained architecture had cracked open. He told Lily once, sitting in the garden at the estate outside Los Angeles with Arthur on his glove, "Your mother walked into a room and the room became hers, not because she demanded it, because she simply filled it." He had paused. "I've known a great many powerful people in my life, Lily. Your mother was the most powerful person I've ever met." Lily's father had died when Lily was very young in a car accident on a country road in California. She had no real memory of him, only photographs and the things other people said. It was her mother who had raised her alone with elegance and creativity and a fierce, practical love that had shaped Lily into something Patricia Langley had not expected and could not categorize. She did not think any of this consciously as she sat in seat 2A, looking at the finished hawk. But it was all there, just below the surface of everything she did. She turned the page and started something new. 2 rows back, the businessman in 3A, his name was David Brooks. He ran a mid-size investment firm in Manhattan and had been a Continental Airways Platinum member for years. He had been processing everything that had happened with the systematic attention of a man accustomed to evaluating situations for their implications. He had said nothing throughout the entire incident. He had watched. He had listened. He had cataloged. David Brooks knew Mr. William Harper, not personally, not well, but professionally, in the way that anyone with serious money and a long career in finance knew the major players. He knew Harper Holdings. He knew the acquisition of Continental Airways. He knew enough to understand with complete clarity exactly what had happened in this cabin and exactly what it meant. He looked at the back of seat 2C, where Patricia Langley sat in her expensive coat and her expensive silence. He felt something that he examined carefully before he allowed himself to feel it fully, because he was not a man who indulged in emotions he hadn't analyzed first. And the thing he felt, he realized, was not quite pity. It was something adjacent to pity, but with a harder edge. It was the feeling you get when someone walks through a door they were warned not to open. He picked up his phone and sent a text to his wife. It said, "Something happened on this flight. Tell you when I land." Then he put his phone down and looked at the small dark head of the child in seat 2A bent over her sketchbook, absolutely untroubled. He thought about his own daughter, who was around the same age, and what it would mean to her to sit the way Lily sat, to speak the way Lily spoke, to have been through what Lily had clearly been through. You could see it if you were paying attention in the quietness of her, in the way she moved through difficulty without letting it move her. and to still draw a hawk with that kind of care. He made a private decision sitting in 3A that had nothing to do with the rest of the evening's events. It was a decision about his daughters and about the conversations he intended to have with her when he got home. It was the kind of decision that happens quietly with no audience and sometimes matters more than anything else that happens in a given day. He picked up his wine and allowed himself at last to take a drink. The moment came without warning, the way the important moments usually do. Patricia Langley had been sitting in rigid silence when she reached a breaking point of a very particular kind. Not an angry breaking point, not the sharp fracture of someone who has lost control, but the slow, pressurized breaking point of a person who has been holding too many things together too tightly for too long and has finally run out of the strength to keep holding. She pressed her call button. Rachel appeared. "Yes, Mrs. Langley?" "I'd like to speak to the passenger in 2A, Patricia said. Her voice was different now. The sharp edges had gone. What was left was something flatter and more exposed. Rachel looked at her carefully. I'm not going to cause a scene," Patricia said. I need to." She stopped. She looked at her hands. "Please." Rachel stood still for a moment. Then she said, "I'll ask." She walked to seat 2A and crouched down. Lily looked up. "The lady in 2C would like to speak with you," Rachel said quietly. "You absolutely don't have to. Just say the word and I'll tell her no." Lily looked over at Patricia. Patricia was staring straight ahead, not performing anything, not preparing anything. She looked simply like a woman sitting with the consequences of herself. "Okay," Lily said. Rachel moved aside. Patricia turned in her seat to face Lily across the narrow space between them. Up close, without the armor of her outrage, she looked older than she had earlier, or perhaps just more real. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't know your name," she said finally. "Your real name, I mean. I know your last name now, but I don't know, I never asked." Lily looked at her steadily. "Lily?" Patricia nodded once, a small nod like something being acknowledged. "Lily." She paused. "I want to tell you that what I did with your sketchbook was—" She stopped again. Her jaw tightened. "It was wrong. I should not have touched it." Lily said nothing. She was listening. "I've been sitting here trying to think of a way to make it make sense," Patricia said. "And I can't. There isn't one. I was angry and I took it out on you, and you didn't deserve that." A pause. "You didn't deserve any of it," Patricia said. The cabin was quiet. Not the self-conscious quiet of people pretending not to listen. The genuine quiet of people who have stopped breathing because something real is happening, and they don't want to disturb it. Helen Brooks held very still across the aisle. Lily looked at Patricia for a long moment. Then she said, "I know you didn't know who I was." "That shouldn't have mattered," Patricia said quickly. Too quickly, like something she had been practicing. "No," Lily said. "It shouldn't have." Patricia absorbed this. She absorbed it the way you absorb something that is both true and painful, which means you have to let it land fully before you can do anything with it. "No," she agreed. Her voice was quiet. "It shouldn't have." A silence stretched between them. Not hostile, just large. Then Lily said, "Can I show you something?" Patricia blinked. "What?" Lily picked up her sketchbook and turned it so Patricia could see the hawk drawing, the finished one. filled in and detailed and precise with the wings spread and the body angled in descent, every feather placed with the particular care of someone who has studied the real thing. Patricia looked at it. Something moved across her face. "You drew this? On this flight?" "Most of it," Lily said. "I started at the gate." Patricia looked at it for another moment. "It's extraordinary." "His name is Arthur," Lily said. "He's my grandfather's hawk. He lands on my arm sometimes." Patricia looked from the drawing to Lily's face. "You're not afraid of him?" "I was," Lily said. "I'm not anymore." Patricia nodded slowly. She looked at the drawing one more time, and then she looked at her own hands in her lap, and something in her shoulders dropped, just slightly, just a fraction from the height they had been held at. "I'm sorry, Lily," she said. It was a different kind of apology than the first one. The first one had been structured, managed, a concession built from the materials of a woman who was accustomed to managing her own narrative. This one was shorter and rougher and cost more. Lily looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Okay. Not, I forgive you. Not, it's fine. Not the easy absolution that would have cost Lily nothing and meant nothing either. Just, okay." Which was both less than Patricia had hoped for and more than she had earned. Patricia nodded once more. She turned back to face forward. Rachel, who had been standing at a discreet distance with the particular stillness of someone who has witnessed something they were not expecting, caught Lily's eye and gave her the smallest, most private nod. Lily turned to a new page in her sketchbook. She didn't know what she was going to draw yet. She let the pencil rest on the blank page and waited for it to show her. That was when David Brooks's phone buzzed. He picked it up automatically, the way you do when you've been waiting for a response from your wife. And then he looked at the screen, and his expression changed completely. He sat forward in his seat. It was not a message from his wife. It was a news alert pushed through on his financial news app, which he had set to notify him about certain names and certain companies. He read the headline. Then he opened the full article and read that too. His hand tightened slowly on the phone. He looked at the back of seat 2A. He looked at the back of seat 2C. He put the phone face down on his tray table and pressed his call button. Rachel appeared. "Mr. Brooks? I need to speak with the senior crew member," he said. His voice was low and controlled and had the specific cadence of someone who is used to being taken seriously. Not urgently, but soon and privately. Rachel looked at him with fresh attention. "Of course. I'll get Michael." David picked his phone back up. He read the article again. He wanted to be certain he had understood it correctly before he said anything to anyone. He had understood it correctly. He put the phone in his inside jacket pocket and looked out the window at the dark. Michael appeared at his seat shortly. "Mr. Brooks, what can I help you with?" David leaned slightly forward and kept his voice low. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to understand that I'm not trying to create a problem. I'm trying to prevent one." Michael's expression was carefully neutral. "Of course. I have a news alert on my phone from a financial wire service," David said. "It is about Harper Holdings." He paused. "The girl in 2A." Michael held very still. "The alert is about a board meeting scheduled soon in Los Angeles, a vote on a major restructuring of the airline's management agreements. Mr. William Harper has been. The wording in the article is increasingly assertive about operational standards across the fleet." He looked at Michael directly. "He personally reviews incident reports from flights on this route. Personally, Michael. That is in the article." Michael was quiet for a moment. "I see. I don't know what's already been documented from this flight," David said. "But I'd imagine quite a bit has." He paused. That young woman 3 rows back has been on her phone since shortly after the captain came out. I know what filming looks like." Michael looked back toward Natalie's seat. He looked for long enough to confirm what David was telling him. Then he looked back. "Thank you," Michael said. His voice was perfectly steady, but David Brooks, who had built a career on reading people accurately, heard something underneath it that was very close to a man resetting every calculation he had made. "I thought you should know," David said simply. Michael nodded once. He walked back toward the galley with the measured pace of a man who wants to move faster than he's allowing himself to. In the galley, out of sight of the cabin, he leaned against the counter with his eyes closed. Then he straightened, picked up the internal phone, and called the flight deck. "Captain," he said when Reynolds answered, "we may have a larger situation than we discussed. Are you available to talk?" Reynolds said yes. Michael told him about the news alert. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then Reynolds said, "The video, has it been posted?" "I believe so." Another silence. Then Reynolds said very calmly, "All right, let me think for a moment." The moment lasted. Michael waited. "Here's what we do," Reynolds said finally. "Nothing changes. We treat the passenger in 2A exactly as we have been. We document everything from our end with complete accuracy. And when we land in Los Angeles, we do our jobs." A pause. "We've been doing our jobs, Michael." "Yes, sir." "Then we have nothing to worry about. The documentation will reflect that." Michael exhaled slowly. "Understood." "How is she?" Reynolds said. "Ms. Harper?" "Yes." "She's drawing," Michael said. She gave half a piece of chocolate to the woman across the aisle. A brief silence. Then Reynolds made a sound that might, in a different context, have been almost a laugh. "Good," he said. "Good." He ended the call. Michael set the phone down. He looked out the small porthole window at the absolute dark of the night. Then he straightened his jacket, picked up the warm nuts that he had re-prepared while on the call, and walked back into the cabin. He stopped at 2A. Lily looked up. "More nuts?" he said. Lily looked at the small, warm bowl. Then she looked up at Michael with those steady eyes, and she said, "Did something happen?" Michael looked at her. He weighed the honesty of a child's direct question against the professional protocol of a senior crew member. The scales barely moved. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said. Lily looked at him for one more second. Then she reached out and took the bowl of nuts. "Thank you, Michael." He hadn't told her his name. She had read his name tag, the way she read everything, quietly, completely, without making a performance of it. "You're welcome, Ms. Harper," he said. He walked back toward the galley. 3 rows back, Natalie's phone showed millions of views. The comments were coming in so fast, the screen was moving in a continuous blur. She had stopped reading them individually. She was just watching the number climb, one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. The article she was supposed to be writing for her Los Angeles assignment, sitting open and untouched in another window. She looked at the screen. She looked at the cabin. She looked at Lily, small and contained in the wide seat. A pencil in her hand, the sketchbook open. She looked at Patricia Langley sitting in 2C, like a woman slowly understanding the dimensions of a room she has locked herself into. She began to type, not the article she was supposed to be writing, something else entirely. Something that started with the words, "I am on flight 882 right now. I've watched something happen that I need to tell you about." She typed without stopping. When she looked up, Lily had fallen asleep. The sketchbook was still open on the tray table. The new drawing, the one Lily had been working on when she drifted off, was only half finished. It was not a hawk this time. It was a girl in a wide seat looking out a window with the clouds below her and the dark above her, and something in the angle of her back, even half drawn, that communicated unmistakably that she was not afraid of being up this high, that she was, in fact, exactly where she was supposed to be. Patricia Langley looked at it from the corner of her eye. She turned away. She looked at her own reflection, faint and ghostly in the black window beside her. The reflection looked back with the face of a woman who had spent a very long time building a self out of the wrong materials and who had just, somewhere over the middle of the country, without any ceremony at all, begun to understand what those materials had cost her. Outside, the country moved in the dark below them, enormous and unhurried, utterly indifferent to everything that had happened in the first-class cabin of Flight 882. The plane moved through the night at cruising speed. Los Angeles was hours away, and in seat 2A, Lily slept. Her hand rested lightly on the sketchbook. Her breathing was even and quiet. On her face was the expression of someone who, whatever the world put in front of her, had long since made her peace with moving through it. The half-drawn girl on the sketchbook page looked out her half-drawn window. The pencil lay across the page where it had fallen gently from Lily's hand, marking the place where sleep had arrived and the drawing had stopped, right at the moment on the girl in the picture was just beginning to come fully into view. Lily woke up the way she always did, completely and all at once, without the slow drift back that most people experience. One moment she was asleep, the next she was awake. Her eyes open, her mind clear, her hand moving instinctively to the sketchbook still open on the tray table beside her. The pencil had rolled to the edge of the tray. She caught it before it fell. The cabin was darker now. Most passengers had reclined their seats and pulled their blankets up, their screens either off or playing something quiet. The overhead lights had been dimmed to the low blue of deep flight hours. Rachel was moving through the aisle with the practiced near silence of a crew member trained not to wake sleeping passengers, refilling water glasses with a small flashlight held between her teeth. Lily looked at the half-finished drawing, the girl in the wide seat looking out the window. She studied it for a moment, then picked up her pencil and added the window frame, thin, precise lines that turned the suggestion of a view into something definite, something real. She checked the time on the small screen in front of her. Los Angeles was getting closer. She looked to her left. The window was dark, nothing visible outside but the absence of everything, that particular quality of darkness that only exists at altitude. She pressed her palm flat against it briefly, feeling the cold seep through the glass. Across the aisle, Helen Brooks was asleep, her book closed on her tray table, her reading glasses folded on top of it. The businessman, David Brooks, was awake. She could tell by the angle of his head, which was the angle of someone thinking rather than resting. In 2C, Patricia Langley was neither fully asleep nor fully awake. She had the stillness of someone who had stopped fighting consciousness, but hadn't yet surrendered to rest. Her eyes were closed, but her hands folded in her lap were too deliberately placed to belong to someone genuinely sleeping. Lily turned back to her drawing and kept working. She didn't know about the video yet. She didn't know about Natalie, 3 rows back, who had fallen asleep herself with her phone still warm in her hand, and a piece she had written for her personal journalism newsletter sitting in her drafts titled simply "The Girl in Seat 2A." She didn't know that the original video had crossed millions of views, that it had been picked up by news outlets, that a tabloid had run a screenshot of Patricia Langley's face at the moment of recognition under the headline that read, with the tabloid's characteristic lack of restraint, entitled "Passenger's Epic Meltdown at Altitude." She didn't know that Patricia Langley's name had been searchable in ways it had never been searchable before. She just drew. The girl in the picture was nearly finished now. Lily had added the clouds outside the window, soft and indistinct, the way clouds look when you're above them and they're below you, and the whole relationship of the world has been rearranged. She had added the detail of a sketchbook open on the girl's tray table. She was drawing a girl drawing. She hadn't planned it that way. It had simply become that, the way things sometimes do when you follow them honestly instead of directing them. Her mother used to say, "The drawing knows more than you do. Your job is to keep up." She finished the last line, set the pencil down. She looked at what she had made. It was the best thing she had ever drawn. She knew it immediately. The way you sometimes know things about your own work before you have any logical reason to know them. It was better than the hawk. It was better than anything in the book. It had something in it that she hadn't put there consciously, some quality of the night and the height and everything that had happened, that made the drawing feel less like a picture of a girl and more like a picture of something that couldn't quite be named but could be immediately felt. She closed the sketchbook. She held it in her lap for a moment. Then she opened it again to the hawk drawing and carefully, precisely, tore it along the spine. A clean tear. She folded the page once, leaned across, and placed it on the tray table beside Helen Brooks' sleeping glasses, tucked under the closed book so it wouldn't slide away. She did not leave a note. She did not need to. She closed the sketchbook again and leaned her seat back slightly and looked at the ceiling of the cabin and thought about her grandfather. Mr. William Harper was elderly and stood a bit over 5 feet tall in his good shoes and had white hair that he wore slightly long by the standards of men his age and a face that had been weathered by decades of paying genuine attention to things. He was not a man who made dramatic entrances or theatrical statements. He was a man who listened more than he spoke and who, when he did speak, had the quality of someone whose words had been selected with the kind of care that made you want to write them down. He had called Lily the morning before she flew. He always called the morning before she flew. "Are you packed?" he'd asked. "Since yesterday," she'd said. "Good. Arthur has been unsettled all week. I believe he knows you're coming." "Hawks don't know things like that," Lily said. "Hawks know everything," he said. "We simply haven't asked them the right questions." A pause. "The car will be at arrivals. My driver, Thomas, you remember him?" "I remember him." "And Lily." His voice had changed slightly. The tone he used when he was saying something that mattered more than the words themselves. "Your mother would have been proud of you. I want you to know that. Every time I see you, I know that. I thought you should hear it said." Lily had held the phone for a moment before she answered. "I know, Grandpa." "Good," he said. "Safe travels, my darling." She thought about that now. Safe travels. She almost smiled. She had drifted back toward sleep, not quite reaching it, when the thing happened that changed the temperature of the entire remainder of the flight. Patricia Langley's phone buzzed. It buzzed against the hard surface of the tray table where she had set it face down, and the sound was loud enough in the near-silent cabin that it startled her out of her half-sleep. She grabbed it automatically, looked at the screen. It was her husband, Robert. It was deep into the night Los Angeles time, which meant it was not a casual check-in. Robert Langley did not call at that hour for reasons that were not urgent. She answered immediately. "Robert?" "Patricia." His voice was low and controlled in the particular way that meant he was choosing not to be something else entirely. "I need you to tell me right now whether what I'm looking at on my computer screen is actually you." The cold that moved through Patricia's body then was not the cold of the aircraft. It was deeper and more specific. "What are you looking at?" she said. "A video," Robert said, "of a woman on a plane throwing a child's sketchbook into the aisle." A pause. "Millions of views, Patricia. It was on my news feed. My brother sent it to me. My assistant sent it to me. Patricia closed her eyes. "Is that you?" Robert said. A long silence. "Yes," she said. She heard him exhale. It was the exhale of a man who has been holding something for a long time and has just set it down somewhere public and can't pick it back up. "Do you know whose granddaughter that child is?" he said. "I know now," Patricia said. "William Harper," Robert said. "Patricia, William Harper. I know. We have holdings with a fund that is managed by a firm that has a direct relationship with Harper Holdings. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "Robert, the club annual dinner is coming up. Mr. William is the honorary chair. We are on the guest list." His voice tightened. "We were on the guest list." Patricia pressed her free hand flat against her leg. "Robert, I will handle this." "How?" he said. "Patricia, there is a video of you pointing at a 10-year-old girl and screaming at her in a first-class cabin. And it has been viewed millions of times. How are you going to handle that?" She had no answer. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she had opened her mouth to answer a question, and there was simply nothing there. The mechanisms that had always produced the right phrase, the managed response, the strategic pivot, they were silent. All of them. "I'll call you when I land," she said finally. Robert said nothing for a moment, then, "Who is she, the girl?" "Her name is Lily," Patricia said, and she said it differently than she had said anything else in the entire conversation, differently than she had said anything in the entire flight. Quietly, like it was the only honest thing she had managed to say in hours. Robert heard it. "Patricia." His voice changed. Not softer exactly, but different. The voice of someone who has been married to a person long enough to hear what is underneath what they're saying. "What happened on that plane?" Patricia looked at the closed sketchbook on Lily's tray table nearby. She looked at Lily's small sleeping profile. She looked at her own hand in her lap. "I'll tell you when I land," she said again. "I promise." She ended the call. She put the phone down. She did not go back to sleep. At the front of the cabin, Michael was awake and had been awake with the particular vigilance that had taken over from ordinary professional alertness. He had a tablet in his hand with the airline's internal incident documentation system open, and he had been composing the incident report with a care that he had never previously applied to an incident report in his years of flying. Every word, every action he had taken, and why. Captain Reynolds' involvement, the exchanges with Mrs. Langley, the confirmation call with Ellis, the passport review. He wrote it all with the precision of someone who knows the document they are creating is going to be read by people who matter, and in circumstances he cannot fully predict. He had reached the section describing Captain Reynolds' appearance in the cabin when Rachel appeared beside him. "Michael." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The video." He looked up. "It's on the news," she said. He set the tablet down. "Not just a social media post anymore," Rachel said. "It's an actual article with a headline." She showed him her phone. The article had gone up. It had the headline, the video embed, and context that included the words Continental Airways and Harper Holdings. Michael read it. Then he handed the phone back. "Finish your rounds," he said. "Don't say anything to anyone. When we land, go directly to the debrief." Rachel nodded. "Is she going to be okay, the girl?" Michael looked towards seat 2A. Lily's seat was reclined slightly, her sketchbook on the tray table, her small frame still and composed. "She was already okay," Michael said. She was okay before any of us got involved. Rachel looked at him. "That's true," she said. "Idiot," she said. She walked back into the cabin. Michael picked up his tablet and kept writing. The next thing that happened, nobody in the cabin could have predicted. The cabin had shifted from deep flight quiet into the early stirring of a plane beginning its long approach toward consciousness and preparation. A few passengers had woken and were adjusting seats, ordering coffee, reclaiming the day. Natalie woke up, checked her phone, and made a sound that she converted quickly into a cough, but that was in origin something close to a gasp. Her article, not the video, the written piece she had published to her newsletter, had been shared widely. It had then been picked up by publications. Her inbox had many unread messages. She sat very still for a moment. Then she opened her email, found the message from the editor of a national magazine she'd been trying to get an assignment from for years, and read it. It said, "We'd like to talk to you about expanding your piece for our next issue. Are you available for a call this week?" She put the phone face down on her tray table. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the back of seat 2A. She picked the phone back up and began typing a reply. David Brooks had slept and was awake again, his mind moving through the implications of the morning with the systematic efficiency of a man who gets up early every day because the world doesn't wait. He had checked the news on his phone. He had seen the video. He had seen the article. He had seen financial news items that mentioned Harper Holdings in the context of the incident, each framed slightly differently, but all pointing toward the same question about what the public visibility of Mr. William Harper's granddaughter's treatment might mean for the airline's next board meeting. He had also seen something none of the articles were talking about yet. A piece of financial news buried in a wire service report about a member of Harper Holdings' board of directors who had submitted a formal letter of concern regarding Continental Airways' passenger experience standards. A letter submitted just before this flight. David read that line. It meant something. He wasn't certain exactly what it meant yet, but it meant something about the timing, and about Mr. William Harper, and about the specific intelligence of a man who had built a billion-dollar enterprise by thinking several moves ahead of everyone in the room. He pressed his call button. Rachel appeared. "Mr. Brooks." "Coffee, please," he said. "Black." And he paused. "Is Captain Reynolds planning to come into the cabin before we land?" Rachel looked at him carefully. "I can pass along a message if you'd like." "Oh, please tell him," David said, "that if he has a moment, I'd appreciate a brief word. Nothing urgent, just professional courtesy." Rachel nodded and walked away. David looked at his phone one more time. He looked at the financial wire service piece. He looked at the date on the board member's letter. He looked at the back of seat 2A. He thought about a man who was elderly and had white hair, and a hawk named Arthur, waiting at Los Angeles arrivals for a 10-year-old girl. He thought about the fact that Mr. William Harper had booked his granddaughter into seat 2A on this specific flight, on this specific date using a corporate account that was structured for privacy, but was absolutely traceable to anyone who knew how to look. He thought about the board meeting soon. He set the phone face down. He picked up his coffee when Rachel brought it. He said nothing more. In seat 2A, Lily had finished sleeping. She had washed her face in the small bathroom at the front of the cabin, returned to her seat, and was sitting with the particular alertness of a person who has slept well and is now fully present in the morning that has arrived around them. The lights had come up. The breakfast service was beginning. The captain had come on the intercom to announce their descent into Los Angeles with a current temperature and overcast skies. Lily received her breakfast tray with both hands and said thank you to Rachel. She ate her fruit and her small croissant with the methodical attention of a child who was genuinely hungry and didn't perform eating for social reasons. She drank her orange juice. She looked out of the window. Below them now, for the first time in hours, there was something to see. The coast of California, gray, green, and familiar from above, the patchwork of fields and roads and towns that always looked to Lily coming in from the east, like a quilt that someone very old and very patient had been making for a very long time. She pressed her palm against the cold window glass. "Almost there," she said, quietly to no one in particular, or to someone who wasn't there. Helen Brooks woke up to find the hawk drawing tucked under her book. She picked it up. She unfolded it. She looked at it for a long time, and then she looked across the aisle at Lily. Lily was looking out the window. Then, as if she felt the attention, she looked back at Helen. Helen held up the drawing. Lily nodded very slightly. Helen pressed it carefully back into a fold and tucked it into her bag, into the inner pocket, the one she used for things she wanted to make sure she did not lose. She looked at Lily. "Do you know what a gift is?" she said. Lily tilted her head slightly. "Not a present," Helen said. "A gift. The real kind. The kind that comes from being made a certain way and choosing to use it and not letting people take it from you." She held Lily's gaze. "Do you know what I mean?" Lily was quiet for a moment. "My mom used to say something like that." "She was right," Helen said simply. "Hold on to it." Patricia Langley had not eaten breakfast. She had sat through the service with her tray untouched and her hands in her lap and her face in the expression of a woman who was in the process of a very difficult private accounting, an accounting of a life, of a self, of the specific architecture of choices that had led to this particular morning on this particular plane, with this particular view of herself in the dark window and this particular knowledge, new and raw and impossible to unfeel, of what she had looked like to every person in this cabin. She was not by nature a person who did this kind of accounting. She had built her adult life on the principle that forward momentum was its own form of integrity, that what you had done was less important than what you were doing now, that the rear-view mirror was for people who had nothing worth looking at ahead of them. She had believed this sincerely. She had organized herself around it. But millions of people had watched her throw a child's sketchbook on the floor of an airplane, and the child's name was Harper. And the child had drawn a hawk with her own pencil, while the world came apart around her, and not one single thing Patricia had done or said had moved her by even a fraction. The mirror had found her all the way up here. That was the thing she couldn't stop thinking about. She had tried to outrun it her whole life, and it had found her anyway at altitude in the form of a 10-year-old girl with a green backpack and steady eyes. She looked at Lily. Lily was finishing her orange juice. She set the glass down. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the sketchbook. She opened it to the half-finished drawing of the girl in the wide seat. She looked at it. She picked up her pencil. She added a window. And outside the window, just visible at the very edge of the frame, the sharp, dark shape of a hawk in descent. Patricia watched her. Lily didn't look up. "Lily," Patricia said. Lily looked up. Patricia opened her mouth. She had prepared something. In the long, sleepless hours before dawn, she had worked on a sentence. Several sentences, actually. Carefully built and honestly intended. But looking at Lily now, with the morning light finally beginning to come through the windows and the coast of California somewhere below them, all of it felt inadequate in a way that no amount of preparation could fix. She said the only true thing she had. "I hope your grandfather is well," she said. "I hope it's a good visit." Lily looked at her for a long moment. The look was not warm, and it was not cold. It was the look of someone hearing something and deciding in real time what weight to give it. "Thank you," Lily said. She looked back at her drawing. Patricia turned away. She looked at her tray table, the untouched breakfast, the cooling coffee. She picked up the coffee cup and drank it. She put it down. She folded her napkin. She straightened the items on her tray with a precision that was not about tidiness and had everything to do with needing something to do with her hands. While the largest reckoning of her adult life sat quietly in the seat nearby and drew a hawk coming home. The seatbelt sign came on. The captain's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Los Angeles International. Local time is morning. We expect a smooth approach. Please ensure your seats are in the upright position and your tray tables are stowed." Lily closed her sketchbook. She put her pencil in the front pocket of her backpack. She stowed her tray table. She buckled her seatbelt. She turned to look out the window one last time. California was fully visible now, spreading out below them in the gray morning light. Every road and field and village precise and familiar. She could not see the estate yet. It was too far west, but she knew the direction and she looked toward it anyway. The way you look toward a place you know, even when you can't see it. Arthur would be in his mews this morning. Thomas would be at arrivals with the car. Her grandfather would have been awake since early, the way he always was. And he would have had his tea at the kitchen table and looked at the morning and thought about what the day required. He would be thinking about her. She knew that as certainly as she knew anything. She thought about what she was going to tell him. She would tell him about the drawing. She would tell him about Helen and the chocolate. She would tell him what Captain Reynolds had said and what Michael had said, and the way Rachel had smiled at her. She would tell him because he had taught her to notice people, and she had noticed people, and he would want to hear about that. She would not at first tell him about Patricia. She would wait, and she would decide whether to tell him, and she would make that decision based on what she thought was right, not on anger which had already passed, and not on the satisfaction of reporting a wrong which was too small, but on what was actually worth carrying forward and what was worth leaving on the plane. She was 10 years old, and this was how she thought about things. It had taken her mother and grief and one hawk and one kind older woman and many hours alone in a window seat to become someone who thought about things this way. She had not done it on purpose. She had simply paid attention the way her grandfather had told her to, and the things worth knowing had come to her. The wheels of the plane came down with a low, mechanical groan. Los Angeles was below them, gray and enormous and full of everyone it had always been full of, going about the specific business of the specific morning it happened to be. Somewhere in arrivals a car was waiting. Somewhere in the west a hawk sat in his mews in the morning stillness and turned his head toward the sound of a plane beginning its descent. Lily pressed her palm flat against the window. One last time. She was almost there. The wheels touched the runway at Los Angeles International with the specific certainty of something that has traveled a long way and finally arrived exactly where it was always going to arrive. The cabin jolted slightly, then steadied, and the engines shifted into reverse thrust with a sound like the plane exhaling after holding its breath for the flight. Outside the windows, the gray morning light of Los Angeles ran alongside them as they slowed. The runway lights blurring past, the familiar sprawl of the airport rising up around them like a city that existed only to handle arrivals and departures, and everything that traveled in between. Lily had her seatbelt already buckled and her backpack already on her lap. She had been ready. Not anxious, not impatient, simply ready in the way that she did most things, completely and in advance. Rachel moved through the cabin with the post-landing routine. checking seats, collecting the last of the cups, making sure tray tables were up and seat backs were forward. When she reached row 2, she paused. "We'll have someone escort you through arrivals," she said to Lily. "Standard protocol for unaccompanied." "Thomas is in arrivals," Lily said. "My grandfather's driver. He'll find me." "I know," Rachel said. "But someone will walk with you from the gate, just to make sure, okay?" Lily nodded. "Okay." Rachel started to move on. Then she stopped. She turned back. She looked at Lily with an expression that had nothing professional in it whatsoever. That was purely the face of a person who has something they need to say and has decided this is the last moment they'll have to say it. "It was an honor," Rachel said. "Flying with you. I mean that." Lily looked up at her. "You were kind to me," she said, "from the beginning. I noticed." Rachel's throat moved. She pressed her lips together briefly. Then she nodded once and moved on down the aisle. And if anyone had been paying close attention, they might have noticed that she did not look back. The plane came to a full stop at the gate. The jetway connected with a soft mechanical thud. The seatbelt sign went off, and the cabin, which had been held in the particular compressed stillness of final descent, released into the familiar sound of people standing and reaching for overhead bins and beginning the process of becoming themselves again after the suspension of a long flight. Patricia Langley did not stand immediately. She sat while the people around her gathered their things, her coat folded neatly on her lap, her carry-on bag retrieved from the overhead bin by a flight attendant without her having to ask. Her whole body carrying the specific exhaustion of someone who has not slept and has spent the entire night in a sustained internal reckoning. She looked at the seat in front of her. She looked at her hands. She looked at nothing in particular with the focused emptiness of a person whose inner life was, for once, so loud that the external world had become merely scenery. Lily stood. She settled her backpack onto her shoulders, straightened its straps with the practiced efficiency of someone who has worn this particular backpack and knows its weight exactly. She picked up her sketchbook and held it under one arm. She turned to the aisle. Helen Brooks was standing already, her own bag over one arm, her book tucked into her outer pocket. She caught Lily's eye as Lily turned. "Safe onward," Helen said. "You too," Lily said. Helen held her gaze for one more second. Then she smiled, the real kind, full and unhurried, and moved into the aisle ahead of her. David Brooks was behind them both, his jacket straightened, his phone in his inside pocket. His expression the neutral, controlled face of a man who was already moving mentally toward the next thing, but who paused when he reached row 2 and looked at Lily. "It was a privilege," he said, simply. Lily looked at him. She wasn't entirely sure what he meant, but she understood from the way he said it that he meant something real. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and moved on. 3 rows back, Natalie had her bag over her shoulder and her phone in her hand and was reading her inbox with the slightly stunned expression of someone standing at the edge of something they can feel the size of but cannot yet see the full shape of. Many new messages. The magazine editor had followed up. A television producer had sent a brief, direct, and extremely serious inquiry. A literary agent whose name she recognized from the books on her shelf had sent a message that began with the words, "I don't usually reach out this way, but..." She put her phone in her pocket. She looked at Lily standing in the aisle ahead of her, waiting with the patient stillness of a child who has spent her whole life being the smallest person in a given space, and has learned that small does not mean lesser, and waiting does not mean powerless. Natalie thought about the piece she had written. She thought about the words she had used. the specific words and whether they were adequate to the thing they were trying to describe. She had tried to write it honestly, to write what she had seen without making it into something larger than it was or smaller than it was, to let the true size of it come through in the facts alone. She had written about Lily's voice and Lily's hands, and the pencil rolling to the edge of the tray. She had written about Helen's command, not 1 inch, and about David Brooks sitting very still in 3A and making a private decision about his daughter. She had written about Michael and his years in his face when he read the passport. She had written at the end 1 paragraph about what it felt like to watch a 10-year-old girl demonstrate under pressure, and without apparent effort, a quality of selfhood that most people spent their entire lives trying to locate and never quite finding. She had not named it. She had simply described what it looked like and trusted the reader to feel what it was. She moved into the aisle. The jet bridge was cool and slightly bright and smelled of the particular industrial cleanness of airports. Lily walked through it with her backpack on and her sketchbook under her arm, and she was as she had been for the entire flight, unperformative in a way that continued to be startling. She was simply a child walking off a plane, except she was not simply anything, and everyone who had been on this flight knew it now, in a way they hadn't known it hours ago. Michael was standing at the gate door. He had come to the door specifically. He had stood at the end of the jet bridge and waited, which was not his standard protocol, and which he had made no attempt to explain to Rachel. When she had raised an eyebrow, when Lily came through the door, he was there. "Miss Harper," he said, "I'll be walking with you to arrivals." Lily looked up at him. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. "I'd like to." She considered this for exactly a second. "Okay," she said. They walked together through the gate and into the terminal. The tall man in the Continental Airways uniform and the small girl with the green backpack and Michael held the pace to hers, which was steady and unhurried, and they did not talk very much. And what talking there was felt appropriate in its smallness. "Is Arthur the hawk you drew?" Michael asked. Lily glanced up at him. "Yes." "You got him right," Michael said. "I could tell it was a real hawk, not a generic one." Lily thought about this. "He sits very still when he wants to." She said, "But you can always feel that he's about to move." "I tried to put that in." Michael nodded. "You did." They walked. Behind them, through the arrivals process, the rest of the passengers from Flight 882 were dispersing into the ordinary machinery of a morning at Los Angeles International. Helen Brooks was met at the gate by a younger woman who hugged her with the easy familiarity of a daughter who has done this many times, and Helen held on for slightly longer than usual. And when she pulled back, she said something that made the younger woman look at her with curiosity, and Helen shook her head and said she would explain later. And they walked away together with Helen's hand in the crook of her daughter's arm. David Brooks went directly to the business arrivals lane, cleared customs, and was in a car to the city. In the car, he called his wife, who asked about the text he had sent. He started to explain and ended up telling the whole story start to finish, and when he was done, there was a silence on the other end of the line. And then his wife said, "Call Amelia when you get home. Not tonight. This morning before she goes to school." Amelia was their daughter. David said he would. He did. Natalie cleared customs and walked through arrivals and sat down on a bench and called her mother. It was early in the morning there, too early, but her mother answered on the second ring, because that is what mothers do when their children call from far away. Natalie said, "Mama, something happened on the plane." And then she sat in the middle of Los Angeles International arrivals and told her mother everything. And her mother listened. And when she was finished, her mother said in Spanish, "Write all of it down, every word. Don't lose any of it." Natalie laughed and said it was already written. Her mother said, "Then make sure the world reads it." It already was. And Patricia Langley walked through the terminal alone. She had spoken to no one on the jet bridge, and no one at the gate, and no one in the customs hall where she had moved through the queue, with the focused silence of a woman who is holding herself together with a very precise and effortful grip. She had her carry-on bag and her expensive coat and her phone, which she had not looked at since the call with Robert. And she was moving through Los Angeles International the way people move through places, when they are not yet ready to arrive anywhere. The video had millions of views by the time her passport was stamped. She did not know this. She did not look at her phone. She walked through the nothing to declare lane with nothing to declare except everything. And she came out into the arrivals hall and stopped. Robert was there. She had not expected him. He lived in Los Angeles, yes. And the drive from the area was not long. But she had not asked him to come, and she had not expected him, and seeing him standing there in the early morning of the arrivals hall in his good coat, his face tired from a night he had not slept through, either his expression, the specific expression of a husband who is angry and frightened and has come anyway, undid something in her that had been held under pressure for the entire flight. She walked toward him. She stopped in front of him. She did not say anything. He looked at her for a long moment. "You look terrible," he said. It was not unkind. "I feel terrible," she said. He put his hand on her arm, not a hug. They were not in their marriage casual huggers in airports, but a hand on her arm which for them was the same thing and sometimes more. "Come on," he said. "The car's outside." They walked. She told him in the car what she had not told him on the phone. Not the events he had seen those, but the thing underneath the events. She told him about the moment Patricia Langley heard the name Harper and understood what she had done, and she told him how it had felt. And she did not make it smaller or more manageable than it was. She told him about the apology she had made, and Lily's answer, which had been okay and nothing more, and which had been, she said, more honest than anything she could have been given. She told him about the night, the hours in the dark over the country, the specific and unrelenting quality of sitting with a mistake that could not be taken back. Robert listened. He did not interrupt. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" he said. Patricia looked out the window at Los Angeles arriving around them, gray and familiar, and full of everything it had always been full of. "I don't know yet," she said. "But I think I have to do something real, not managed, not strategic." She paused. Something real. Robert looked at the side of her face. He had known this woman for years. He had seen her at her best and at her worst, and at most of the stops in between. He had loved her through all of it, sometimes more easily than others. And he had also. And this was the thing about long marriages, the thing nobody tells you, watched her become someone slightly different from the person she had started out being. Not worse exactly, but harder in ways that had cost her things she hadn't noticed losing. He had been trying to find the words for this for years and had never found them. And he looked at her now and thought that perhaps the words had not been necessary. Perhaps what had been necessary was Flight 882 and a child named Lily and millions of people watching. He put his hand over hers. She turned her palm up and held it. In the arrivals hall, something was happening. Lily came through the door from customs with Michael beside her, and she stopped, and her whole face changed. It did not change gradually. It changed entirely and immediately the way a room. All the composure, all the steady, measured calm that had held her for the entire flight still held but underneath it, breaking through at the edges like light through a window that can't quite contain it, was something purely and simply a 10-year-old child who has just seen her grandfather. Mr. William Harper was standing at the arrivals barrier. He was elderly and slight, and he was wearing a dark coat and holding nothing, and doing nothing except standing and watching the door through which his granddaughter would come, with the absolute focused patience of a man who has learned over decades that the things worth waiting for are worth waiting for, completely. When he saw Lily, he smiled. It was not a large smile. It was not theatrical or demonstrative. It was the smile of a man whose face has been lived in for a very long time, and in which the places that feel joy have become so well established that they express it now with perfect economy. A slight deepening at the corners of his eyes, a softening around his mouth, a quality of stillness that transformed in that single moment from waiting into arrived. Lily walked through the barrier. She did not run. She was 10 years old, and she had been through something in the last hours that had required her to be every bit of the person her mother and her grandfather had made her. And she was tired in a way that she would not be able to explain for years until she was old enough to have the vocabulary for it. But she walked quickly with the last of the purposeful energy she had been running on since New York. And when she reached him, she put her arms around him and her face against his coat, and she held on. He put both arms around her. He held on. He did not say anything immediately. He simply held her and she held him, and the arrivals hall moved around them with its ordinary morning business. People streaming past with their bags and their phones and their own arrivals and reunions, and none of it touched them. Then he said into the top of her head very quietly, "There you are." And she said into his coat, "Here I am." Michael stood at a respectful distance and watched this, and he felt something move through him that he did not try to name or analyze, that he simply allowed to pass through and leave behind whatever it left behind. He would think about this flight for a long time. He knew that already. He would think about it the way you think about the moments that rearrange something in you without asking permission, and that you are grateful for even when they were difficult, because the rearranging was necessary. And the person you became on the other side of it was more accurate than the one you had been before. After a moment, Mr. William looked up. He looked at Michael. He released one arm from around Lily's shoulders and extended his hand. Michael shook it. "Thank you," Mr. Williams said. His voice was quiet and carried the weight of a man who had chosen those two words over many other possible two words and meant them precisely. Michael said, "She didn't need much from us, sir." Mr. William looked down at Lily, who had stepped back from the embrace and was now standing beside him with his hand on her shoulder, her backpack on, her sketchbook under her arm, her eyes clear and slightly bright. "No," Mr. Williams said, "she never does." He looked at Michael one more time. "You'll be hearing from me." It was not a threat. Michael understood that immediately and completely. It was a statement about the nature of attention, specifically the attention of a man who noticed things and who had been given a great deal to notice. And it was, Michael realized walking away from the barrier a few minutes later, the most consequential thing that had been said to him in his years of flying. Days later, the Continental Airways board meeting convened at the airline's Los Angeles headquarters in a building whose lobby bore a brass plate with the name Harper on it, in letters that had been there for years and that most of the people who worked in the building had long since stopped seeing. The meeting was attended by the full board, by members of the senior executive team, and by Mr. William Harper, who sat at one end of the table in a dark suit and said very little for the early part of the meeting. When he spoke about one thing, not about the video which had by then been viewed by millions and had generated coverage widely, Not about the financial implications or the brand damage or the crisis communication strategy that the executive team had prepared. He spoke about what the video had actually documented, which was not a conflict over a seat. He said that what it documented was a question about what kind of airline this was and what kind of airline it intended to be, and that the answer to that question was something that he would be paying close attention to, going forward personally, in the specific way that the controlling shareholder of a company pays attention to the things that matter to him most. He said one more thing which was not on any agenda and which was not expected. He said that the passenger in question, the one who had caused the incident, was not his primary concern. His primary concern was every other passenger in that cabin, and every cabin on every flight who had ever sat in the position his granddaughter had been put in and had not had the particular protection that his granddaughter's name had provided. He said that was the thing that kept him awake. He said he wanted to know what the airline was going to do about that. The meeting lasted longer. Later, Continental Airways announced a comprehensive revision of its passenger experience standards, including new crew training protocols and a passenger dignity policy that was notable for being specific in a way that such policies rarely are. An aviation industry publication described it as the most substantive operational change the airline had made in years. The coverage mentioned briefly a recent high-profile incident that had brought passenger treatment into focus. It did not mention Lily by name. Mr. William had requested that. In the west of California, on a morning that was cold and clear, Lily Harper stood in the garden of her grandfather's estate with her left arm extended and her sleeve rolled back, and Arthur came out of the sky. She heard him before she saw him. The sound of something moving fast through clean air, a sound like purpose made audible. Then the weight of him landed on her arm, talons finding purchase with a precision that was almost gentle, his wings spreading once and folding. And he turned his head and looked at her with one amber eye that contained something she had never been able to fully articulate and had stopped trying to because some things were not built to fit into words. She stood very still. Behind her, she heard the door of the house and her grandfather's footsteps on the gravel, unhurried. "He knew you were coming," Mr. Williams said. "You always say that," Lily said. "I'm always right," he said. He came to stand beside her. He looked at Arthur and then at Lily and then at the morning around them, the wide green space, the gray sky beginning to open into something paler and more promising, the silence of a place that has been tended carefully for a very long time. "Tell me about the flight," he said. Lily kept her eyes on Arthur. She thought about what to tell and what to keep and where the line was, and she decided that the line was wherever it felt honest. And she started at the beginning and told him everything. She told him about the sketchbook. She told him about Helen and the chocolate. She told him about Rachel's smile and Michael's face when he read the passport, and Captain Reynolds' voice saying her name in the way that made the whole cabin go still. She told him about Patricia Langley in the dark over the country saying sorry with the rougher, costlier kind of sorry, and about what she had said in return. And her grandfather listened to that part without interrupting or commenting, which meant he understood it. She told him about the hawk drawing she had given to Helen. Mr. William was quiet for a moment. "Was it a good drawing?" "It was the best one I've ever done," Lily said. "Good," he said. "Then it went to the right place." She told him about the half-finished drawing of the girl in the seat and the window and the hawk at the edge of the frame. She told him she still hadn't finished it. "Will you?" he said. Lily thought about it. Arthur shifted slightly on her arm. She steadied it without thinking. "Yes," she said. "I know what it needs now." She knew what the drawing needed because she understood it differently now than she had high above the country. She understood that the hawk at the edge of the frame was not arriving. It was returning. There was a difference that she had not known how to draw before, but knew how to draw now. And it was the difference between something going somewhere it had never been and something coming back to exactly where it knew to be. She held her arm steady. Arthur looked at the morning with his amber eye, still and alert and completely himself the way he had always been. Lily looked at the morning with him. She was 10 years old, and her mother was gone. And her name was Harper, and she had flown through the night over the country alone, and arrived exactly where she was supposed to be, and the morning was cold and clear and entirely hers. Some people are born into power and spend their whole lives becoming smaller than it. And some people are simply born and choose through every ordinary and extraordinary moment that the world puts in front of them to become larger than anything the world tries to make them carry. Lily Harper had chosen before she even knew she was choosing, and no one, not on that flight or anywhere else, would ever be able to take that from her. In the end, the most powerful lesson from that unforgettable flight wasn't about wealth, status, or who sat where. It was about something far deeper and more human. True dignity doesn't announce itself with loud voices or expensive coats. It shows up quietly in a 10-year-old girl who refused to be diminished, even when the world tried to shrink her. Lily Harper taught every passenger on that plane, and now millions watching around the world, that real strength isn't loud or flashy. It's calm. It's steady. It's the quiet courage to hold your ground, with kindness when someone else has lost theirs. In a world that often rewards entitlement and forgets basic respect, Lily reminded us that the way we treat people when we think they have no power says everything about who we really are. Her grace under pressure, her gentle forgiveness, and her unshakable sense of self left grown adults speechless and changed hearts in ways no argument ever could. That little girl with the sketchbook didn't just keep her seat. She kept her humanity intact, and in doing so, she lifted everyone who witnessed it. If this story touched something deep inside you, if it made you pause and think about how you treat others when no one important is watching, then hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that matter. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one moment in your life when someone's quiet dignity changed how you see the world? Let's keep this conversation going. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. See you in the next one.